Welcome to the Parenting Tips Podcast. I'm Jeff Ryland. In this episode, we will be talking about grandfamilies. It's about grandparents and other relatives who take over the primary role of caregiving for children. This episode is meant to be an introduction to some of the unique challenges that these special caregivers face and some tips to consider. I'm often reminded that knowledge is power. In the words of Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. My hope is that you take away a few more tools for your parenting toolbox. So, what does grandfamilies mean? Grandfamilies are families where the grandparents are the primary caregivers to their grandchildren. But more broadly, this can include children being raised by aunts, uncles, great-grandparents, and great-aunts and uncles. These circumstances are also referred to as kinship care or kinship families. In episode 2 of the Parenting Tips podcast, I talked about who parents. We sometimes assume that biological parents are the parents, and this is true most of the time, but it takes a whole village. When I was writing that episode, I had grandparents and other relatives in mind. I have had the privilege to know many amazing relatives who have stepped in to help raise the children in their extended family. You have my gratitude. Most grandparents or other relatives did not plan for or seek this responsibility. When parents give birth to their children and raise them to adulthood, the idea of going back and doing the parenting thing all over again with grandchildren is not the first thing on their minds. It is a great sacrifice, but it also comes with great rewards. Still, grandparents and relatives, members of the grandfamilies community, need support and tools to help raise their children. Grandfamilies exist for many reasons. There may be only one or a combination of reasons why grandparents and other relatives step in to raise children. Parents may be unable to raise children due to debilitating addictions or mental health that make it nearly impossible for parents to provide consistency, nurturing, and discipline needed to raise healthy children. Or parents may be incarcerated. Grandparents step in when a parent's physical or medical conditions make it impossible for them to parent. Grandparents step in when parents die. Grandparents step in when parents are deployed in the military. Grandparents step in when parents become homeless. Grandparents step in when there is a divorce and adults are needed to help care for the child or the children. Grandparents step in when there's a history of abuse or neglect, or when the home is not safe due to intimate partner violence. Grandparents step in when there's a teen pregnancy or a very young parent that's unable to raise a child alone. Again, for all of you who have ever stepped in as members of the grand family, thank you. So, just how many kids are raised by relatives? According to GrandFacts, a fact sheet broken down by each state in the country, in Wisconsin, 79,500 children live in homes where a relative is the head of the household. Of that number, 25,000 are being raised without a parent being present. The link to the GrandFacts website is in the show notes, so you can check on those statistics and what they look like in your state. For those relatives who take on the duties of raising their kin, it may help to know that they're not alone. Statistics from the last several years show that 1 in 10 children live in a household with at least one grandparent. This data represents a wide range of circumstances that include multi-generational households where 3 or more generations live under one roof. It also reflects those circumstances where the grandparent is the primary caregiver to their grandchild. Breaking this down further, the data from the 2019 American Community Survey shows that 2.5 million grandparents, about 1/3 of all grandparents living in homes with grandchildren, were the primary caretakers, being responsible for their grandchildren's day-to-day needs. Grandparents and other family members providing caregiving to relatives face a range of challenges in raising their grandchildren as part of a grand family or being involved in kinship care. If you are a grandparent, it is very unlikely that this was something you anticipated or planned when you first became a parent. Most people in this time in history did not expect to be raising grandchildren by providing day-to-day daycare. If you are an aunt or uncle or a great aunt or uncle or a great-grandparent or even an older sister or brother, raising a relative's child was not something you thought about doing when considering your life's plans or goals. Whether you are a grandparent or another relative to the child you're raising, it has likely made a difference in how you live your life. As I mentioned, most kinship placements are not planned years in advance, and the circumstances that lead to kinship placements are rarely joyous ones. Some of the changes that occur include a shift in focus for your own life. Many parents whose children are out of the home may be working in their career or job and developing their own personal interests or hobbies and recreational activities now that their own children are out of the home. Simply stated, raising children is life-changing. Raising children requires an investment in time and resources. Kids are expensive. For many families, the financial piece can be managed with adjustments and additional support, but it also takes time, effort, and sacrifice to put this into place. These stresses can be financial. There are also stresses related to changes in your lifestyle and even the dynamics between family members in the household. Finally, because kinship arrangements occur in mostly stressful situations, the dynamics, your interaction and relationship with the child's parents, may also be a source of additional stress. Many grandparents have mixed feelings about the parenting role. While there is no clear grandparent rule book, many grandparents expect their role will be to enjoy their grandchildren and support the parents. Some grandparents imagine themselves spoiling their grandchildren. They've already done the hard work of raising their own children. Now it's time to build that special relationship with their grandkids and let the parents do the heavy lifting of parenting. This changes when grandparents and other relatives take on the role of being the primary care provider or sharing in these duties each day or for extended periods of time. Another aspect that is commonly experienced is exhaustion. If you are a grandparent or another relative circling back to raise young children or teenagers, you may have less energy than you had 20 or 30 years ago. As a grandparent myself, I can say that providing care for grandchildren, even for short periods of time, a weekend or a week, can be fun and rewarding, but also exhausting. My partner and I have looked at each other and said, how did we do this 25 or 30 years ago? And while there is considerable stress and sacrifice, there is also joy in watching children grow, sharing experiences, building memories, and helping to shape children's lives for them to become successful, happy, healthy adults. It is not one or the other. It is both sacrifice and joy that are experienced in grandfamilies. There are different and overlapping types of circumstances that grandparents and other relatives experience. One situation is when grandparents are providing ongoing daycare for grandchildren. This may occur every day the parent is working. It may also be more part-time each week to help reduce daycare costs and also to have time with grandchildren. This mostly occurs for families with preschool and school-aged children. Another circumstance involves children who live in their grandparents' or other relatives' home informally. The child may reside in the grandparents' home having their own bed or bedroom. Sometimes the parent also lives with the family in a 3-generation dynamic. This can occur when there are problems obtaining housing, job loss, a move, or there has been disruption in the family and the parent and child move in with the grandparents. This is often short-term, but it can last for several years. In either of these circumstances, the grandparents, aunts, or uncles can take over or at least share in the primary caregiving responsibilities. The third circumstance is referred to as a custodial arrangement, when the grandparent or other relatives have legal responsibility for the child by having custody or guardianship. There is no way around the fact that adding members to a household changes things. Studies show that each group of grandparents in these different situations report that raising grandchildren affected their own lives, their relationships within the family and outside the family. It changed their routines, their social connections, and their lifestyle. What can grandfamilies say or do to explain why parents aren't there? Because the circumstances why children are living with relatives may be different, those care providers may need to have differing ways to respond. For example, if a child's parents are unable to provide care due to addictions or mental illness, The way to respond to a child who is wondering or upset about their parent's absence from their life might be different than if that parent is incarcerated or if that parent has been deployed overseas by the military. If your family has been impacted by mental illness or addiction, please check out episodes 59 through 63 for more information and resources. If your family's been impacted by a parent who's been incarcerated, please listen to episode 70 on children with incarcerated parents. Each of these episodes has additional resources in the show notes. Although the reasons and circumstances for why children are not living with their parents may differ, there are some common themes that emerge. Children can be curious, children can be confused, and children can have big emotions, including being mad, sad, or worried about their parent. In almost every circumstances for why a child is not living with a parent, it was not the child's choice. Children have very little control or say in who their caregivers will be or how those decisions are determined. When bad things happen or when children are separated from their parents, it is most often due to circumstances far beyond their control. Since kids can't control the circumstances, the most important thing that caregivers can do is to help them manage their feelings about the situation. When you are confronted with a conversation in which your grandchild says, "I miss my mommy," or "Why is my dad in jail?" or "Why did my dad have to go away?" or "Why doesn't my mom live with me?" you may be tempted to focus on the answer or how to avoid the answer. Sometimes the answer is just too complicated or maybe too painful. Sometimes you may not know the answer. As a general rule, providing limited information for young children is best. As children get older and move toward their teenage years, they are in a better place developmentally to begin to understand some of the complexities that your family situation may represent. When in doubt, focus on the feelings behind the questions and help your child develop skills for managing those feelings. Sometimes the answers are hard to share or are confusing, even for adults to try to understand. Helping your child to manage their emotions about the situation will be more productive and also help your child to develop effective coping skills. If your child says something like, "I miss mommy," help them to identify the feeling that is underneath that statement. You might say, "You sound sad when you think about your mommy. I wonder if it might help to snuggle right now. Maybe listen to some of our favorite music and play a game." A question like, "Why is my dad in jail?" can be challenging. For young children, it may be hard to answer because they don't understand the law. And the child may be mad at the people who put their dad in jail. You might consider giving limited information and say, "Your dad made some big mistakes. He broke some important rules, so now he has to be in jail as a consequence." This may lead to further questions that you may or may not know the answers for. It could also lead to conversations about why people, including kids, tend to do better when they follow the rules and obey the laws. Some children may ask, "Why did my dad have to go away?" Sometimes you don't know the answer. They may have been deployed overseas for military duty. They may have simply abandoned the family. Again, share information that is appropriate and not frightening or confusing for the child. It would be appropriate to share that dad had to go overseas to help the government because he's in the military and one of his jobs is to protect our country. If a child is confused about why a parent doesn't live with them, but they see them from time to time, much of your answer may be driven by the circumstances. Why doesn't my mom live with me? If the parent is stable and able to provide an answer, share the question from your child with them. If the parent is not stable or able to participate in this conversation, step back and consider what would be helpful for the child to know. Again, providing limited information is a good first step. If the parent doesn't live with the child due to mental illness or addiction, see episodes 58 through 63 of this podcast and the corresponding resources in the show's footnotes that can also help. There are some excellent resources to help grandfamilies. KidsMatter Inc. is a resource in Wisconsin that discusses guardianship and many other frequently asked questions for those seeking financial assistance, guardianship, or other supports in Wisconsin. There are also similar resources available in Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa, and other states. The link is in the show notes. To recap, grandfamilies are quite common. Relatives, most often grandparents, but sometimes aunts, uncles, cousins, and older siblings step in to help with raising children. The circumstances that extended family are involved in are rarely ideal. They include stressful situations. It takes a village to raise children. Grandparents and others often sacrifice their life plans and goals to help raise their kin. The work can be hard and also rewarding. Raising a relative's children can sometimes create stressors between you and the parents. There are different levels of involvement, from providing daycare to informal arrangements of caregiving to having guardianship of the child or children. Even though this is not your first rodeo, in that you may have been through this parenting process before, remember, each child is different and will require different parenting tools than some of the tools you used before. It is okay to not always know what to do and to seek help in learning how to do better. When in doubt, focus on their feelings that are lying under the questions surrounding their parents. If the situation or your child's behavior escalates and gets worse, seek professional help for your child and for yourself. Take care of yourself. It takes courage and commitment to step up and help raise children. Thank you for this. Strive to find a balance and stay healthy. Thank you for tuning in and considering this parenting topic. I hope that this information added to your growing toolbox for parenting your child or children. Please consider exploring other topics in this series. Remember, no one parenting tool can do everything. We need many tools to become the best parents for our children. Your children's future depends on you and the time and effort you invest in them today.